Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Gemma and I will be your moderator today. Before we start, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone is ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. First, you should have a control panel on the right side of your screen. You may minimize this panel by clicking on the double arrow button in the upper left corner. You may expand the panel by clicking the same button. Take a moment to practice. Second, you have the ability to submit questions using the chat pane located near the bottom of the control panel. Throughout our presentation, we encourage you to interact with our speakers by typing in questions and comments using the questions pane. We will be answering questions live both during the event and after the presentation. We are recording today's session and we will be making the link to the recording available 24 hours post-event via email. We also encourage you to forward a copy of today's webinar to any coworkers you feel might benefit from the information presented during this session. Without further ado, I would again like to thank you for attending today's webinar, and I will pass you over to our presenters for today's session.
Good morning, and thanks, Gemma, for the introduction. It's Mark Winter here. We're going to be running through the 7Signals webinar for you this morning around Wi-Fi performance management. I'd like to first of all say thank you to all that have attended. We do have a large number of people on the webinar this morning, so please bear with us as we go through questions. We do encourage you to add questions to the chat window. Very important that for the value of your time that you get the most out of it. So on the call this morning we have Eric, who is the VP of Marketing and Product Management from 7Signals, and we also have Paul Baxter, who is the Business Manager for RTLS and Wireless for In Technology Distribution. I'm going to kick off straight away and pass over to Eric, and we'll get the presentations underway. Thanks, Eric.
Oh, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that introduction, and thank you all for attending today. I'm very excited to share with you 7Signal. We are the Wi-Fi performance company, and let's go over quickly what we're going to cover today. So first, I'd like to just tell you a little bit of our history, who and what is 7Signal. Also, we're going to just touch on why Wi-Fi performance is so critical in today's mobile environment. We're going to talk about how there is an alternative solution that we're starting to see on the marketplace, and this is how people will take their existing access points and they'll actually turn them into sensors, and what we want to do is explore that a little bit with you today. Then we're going to talk about how instead of being reactive when it comes to Wi-Fi issues, we want to be proactive and really turn the tables on this entire equation. And then finally, we're going to dive into our solution, and we're going to actually show you what we do, how we do it, and a little bit of a demo. So let's just jump right in. So 7Signal was founded in Helsinki, Finland by a couple of Nokia wireless engineers. What they would do is, this was when Wi-Fi was, or when wireless networks, cellular networks were really coming on strong, as you can see by the, back in the early 2000s, and they developed actually a way for Nokia to actually measure the quality of the cellular experience for end users, for customers. And they said to themselves, you know what? Wi-Fi is going to be the next big thing. How can we take this technology and apply it to the enterprise so that we can improve the quality of the user experience for Wi-Fi networks, for people who are depending upon it in order to get all of their work done, in order to have maximum efficiency? And hence they founded the company. And truly, the company is uniquely focused on improving the Wi-Fi experience for end users. That is the driving force, and that is what, in fact, we were founded upon. The idea here is, in order to do it, we actually need to provide continuous end-to-end Wi-Fi performance testing. And this is what they did for Nokia. This is what they did for cellular networks. They would actually continually, not just when there was a problem, but they would continually and proactively be testing the network, exercising the network, and in doing so, they were able to track and trend performance, and in such a way that they were able to easily identify where the hot spots were, where the dead spots were, and what the trends were. And what they did is they actually relocated, and our new headquarters is now in Akron, Ohio, which is where I am today. These days, Akron, Ohio is most famous for being the home of LeBron James and the champion Cleveland Cavaliers, I'm happy to report. So let's jump right in, shall we? So Reliable Wi-Fi truly has become mission critical. It doesn't matter whether we're in retail establishments whether it be in the Apple Store or in other stores, we actually are now depending upon the Wi-Fi in order to generate revenue on the spot with kiosks or with Square readers, whatever it might be, these devices connected to the Wi-Fi network in order to generate revenue. Or it could be in a warehouse, it could be a BYOD policy where tons of devices are coming into the workplace, all of which are dependent upon high-quality Wi-Fi in order for individuals in their work environments in order to get their work done and get it done efficiently. And then what we're seeing becoming increasingly important is guest access, whether it be in hospitals or universities. People coming onto those campuses, they want to be able to use that guest access quickly, easily, and in many respects they're actually using the quality of that guest access to in fact judge the overall experience, either interacting with that hospital or interacting with that university or whatnot. So really remarkable how Wi-Fi is starting to really take hold in our society. I personally feel like we're undergoing a societal shift. Mobility and mobile is not just a thing or a device, but it's actually becoming who we are and how we operate as a culture, as a society. And as a result, Wi-Fi truly becoming mission critical and becoming expected. And so with that said, I want to do a poll question. And I would like to actually ask our audience today, Mark, if perhaps you can push this poll to our audience. Let's find out how critical Wi-Fi is to your business today. Now, based upon what I just mentioned here, based upon what I've just described, I'm very curious whether it be a university or a hospital that has wireless IV pumps and other equipment, or maybe laptops on wheels. Let's see what our audience says.
So we're just going to run through. Obviously, you can see here we've got a few answers here, Eric. Obviously, mission critical is we're starting to see or looking at the results already. Very high percentage. Increasingly important is getting in there. Not important at this point. We're yet to have anybody actually acknowledge that it's not important. And it looks like everyone's on the right webinar, because the last one was unsure. Might be on the wrong webinar. So we've got about 78% of the people who have voted. We'll just wait a couple more seconds, and then we'll close that poll, and we'll actually show the poll so we can, people that are on the call can also see, how important Wi-Fi is to the other attendees that are on the call. So we'll close the poll in 3, 2, 1, and let me just share the results of that poll. So you can see, obviously, mission critical is, equates to 65%. Increasingly important, 35%. We didn't have anything for not important or unsure. I think I'm on the wrong webinar. So that gives us a really good indication in relation to, where we sort of fit as far as what is, how critical is Wi-Fi to our businesses today. So I'll let you move on now. Thanks, Eric.
Oh, that's outstanding, and truly, I mean, like I said previously, mobility, it's really not just a nice to have anymore, but in fact a must-have situation for many of us, so that's great. All right, let's continue on. So there has been this missing piece in wireless LAN operations, so whether it be we have obviously the wireless access points. That is the backbone of our network. We came along with intrusion detection, security solutions. That is really big and popular today. Very important, so that we can proactively, detect and keep our network secure. And then we've got these wireless LAN troubleshooting tools, and we use these troubleshooting tools in situations where people call us and they indicate that they're having a bad experience, they're having difficulty, they're having trouble. It could be a very serious situation, in fact, if maybe the president of the company is trying to give a PowerPoint presentation and can't, or we're in a hospital and the equipment is not able to send its information to the wireless system, or perhaps at a university where an instructor is trying to administer a test or trying to do a demonstration, and students really can't have the most effective learning experience. So we use these tools. But as with any market, we shift slowly as time goes by from the reactive, which is using a tool, to the proactive. And by being proactive, we switch from using troubleshooting to performance management. So we want to move away from just maintaining a Wi-Fi network, but actually managing a Wi-Fi network. And when we manage a Wi-Fi network proactively, similar to how we've been managing proactively wired networks for the past 30 years using a variety of systems, when we do that, then we rely less on troubleshooting tools. The waste and expense associated with troubleshooting, where we run around all over the place, a truck roll where now we have to dispatch some expert in order to see what's going on, where we give them their tools, whether it be their air check or their fluke tools or whatever they might be. And it's actually very expensive and very wasteful. So by using our system, by putting a system in place which is proactive, we're able to now get ahead of issues before people complain, and we can actually fix issues before we impact productivity. And that's what we're talking about right here. We don't want to manage in a crisis. We want to focus on success. So right now, many of us are familiar with just using either a laptop computer with an antenna or maybe like an air check type of a tool or instrumentation and doing spot checking and walking around. But rather, we want to do continuous performance monitoring so that we can identify trends as the environment changes. I'll tell you what, the iPhone 7 is coming out in probably just a couple of months, and when it does, the environment is going to change. It could change in a dynamic and radical manner. We don't know. iOS 10 is on the horizon, and when that comes out, the environment is going to change. Therefore, you need a system in place that's going to, where information is going to come to you instead of you going out and trying to find out the information. And we do this through a system of notifications and alerts to alert you when there's some kind of impact in Wi-Fi performance. And again, we want to take action before people complain, because when people finally get to the point where they've decided to complain, and many people don't, they just bite their lip and move on and grumble. But when they finally do complain, it's already at a point where they've lost their stream of consciousness. They've actually become less productive in their work. So let's talk a little bit more of the limits of the approaches that we have today. Today we have an approach where it's from what we call the inside out. It's from the controller's point of view, not from the user's point of view. So while when we look into whether it be Aruba Clarity or Aruba Airwave, or if we look into Cisco Prime, we may see that everything looks just fine. That all of the access points have joined the network just fine. The other thing that we might see in Prime is that there is, we can see the utilization in terms of which clients are connected to the, how many clients are connected to the network, what their bandwidth is, all of these things. But we don't see anything with regards to can't connect to the network, or it's very slow and sluggish, or calls are getting dropped. It's incomplete. So again, this is going to result in reactive support. People calling you, people emailing and messaging you, and then you going into some kind of firefighting mode or troubleshooting mode where you are, in some respects, I know in my personal experience, in trying to walk around and try to find these issues, it's almost like you're chasing ghosts, because people will say they're having a bad experience, but then, in fact, what will happen is you'll go to the area and it doesn't even exist anymore. Or when somebody says they're having a bad Wi-Fi experience, they may say, well, it worked fine today, but it worked bad yesterday. Or I think it was over there, but it worked fine over there, over here. There are just so many unanswered questions, making it very difficult to do our jobs as IT professionals. And then when we do something, we really have no way of benchmarking or measuring what we've done in order to ensure that we've actually fixed the problem, addressed the problem in a permanent way so that it doesn't come back. But rather, we just maybe jiggle the handle, so to speak, in order to get it working again, and then we move on. All right, I think it's time for our next poll, Mark. So we're now going to dive into an area of the presentation where we talk about using access points as a sensor. So I know that you know, they're, like, for instance, Cisco is touting that their 3800 access point can be used as a sensor if you so choose, and we've done a lot of research on this, and we're going to share some of that research with you right now. So Mark, what do you got for us here?
Thanks, Eric. So, yeah, I mean, look, we made it pretty simple, this one. We literally had the question was, are you currently using APs as a sensor? Literally, it's a yes, no, or an unsure. We're about 65% of people who voted so far. Interesting results. We'll show them in a minute. We're up to about 81%. We'll just leave it for a couple of more seconds, and then we'll close the poll, and then we'll show those poll results as well. So 89%, a few more people just jumping on now. 98. All right, I'll just leave it a couple more seconds, and then we'll close the poll, and we'll kick off again. And so here's the results of that poll. I'll let you talk through that, mate.
All right, let me try to. It's a little small. It's a little difficult for me to see here. Mark, can you help me out with the numbers I'm seeing here?
Sure. So the yes result was 14%, no was 68%, and unsure was 18%. So
okay.
Very, very high in the no scenario. But there's still 14% that are currently using access points as sensors at this point.
Right. Well, I'll also tell you this, Mark. What we've discovered is that as 7Signal has made some nice progress, some nice headway in the marketplace here, we've actually, for lack of a better term, maybe rattled a few cages. So we've actually seen here in the States, we've seen Cisco talk about some of the capabilities in their 3800 AP that's coming out. I would imagine that down there, you may also start to hear Cisco talking about using access points as a sensor. And so I think it is very important to just kind of go over the facts with our audience today, so I'm happy to do that.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So here we go. So it really comes down to this, my friends, using the wrong tool for the job. So what exactly do I mean by that? Let's take a closer look. So an AP's primary job truly is to serve clients. That's what it was created to do, and that's what it does quite well. So on our screen here, we've got a lot of really satisfied and happy people because we've got a well-designed network, and we've got a lot of people who are using that network in order to get their jobs done. So what happens is that when somebody calls and says that they're having a lot of issues or a lot of problems in a certain area, then the tendency is, okay, well, why don't we take one of our APs in that area and why don't we turn it into a sensor? But when we do that, we are actually now creating a dead spot because of the antenna configuration. There's no way that it could be a sensor and an access point serving clients at the same time. So what's interesting is that what we've also seen is that then somebody will actually come and they will actually then say, well, let's do this after hours so that we don't, in fact, cause any issues during the course of the business day. But then when they do this after hours, they're not actually sensing or testing the environment during a time when there are lots of clients on the network. So as you can see, it's really kind of a vicious circle of chasing your tail, so to speak, that causes a lot of issues. Then there are concerns with coverage. So let me explain what I mean by that. So when you take a sensor, or I'm sorry, when you take an access point and then you actually insert it into the situation and decide, okay, well, I'm just going to take a sensor, or I'm going to take an access point, I'm going to put it into an area where I would like it to work with and connect to other access points and actually do some exercising or do some testing. The issue that we run into is one, because it's not purpose-built for Wi-Fi performance, the omnidirectional antenna inside actually is not optimal for connecting to other access points and is not optimal for actually then testing the performance or the capabilities of the other APs and what they're doing. So as a result, we have a smaller coverage area. And what you would basically have to do in order to get Wi-Fi performance coverage is you would actually then have to insert many of these access points all over your network. And so what originally we think to believe an economical solution becomes a non-economical or very expensive solution quite quickly.
So, Eric, just before we go on to the next slide, we've got a few questions that we might jump into because we want to try and make this as interactive as possible. One of the questions we have is, what about Cisco Clean Air, which still services clients while performing an RF check?
Yes, Cisco Clean Air, does a great job of spectrum analysis. It's actually going to see what kind of interference there is in the environment, which is fantastic. It does that quite well. But what it doesn't do is the end-to-end performance management testing. So it's not doing throughput, packet loss, latency, jitter testing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's not actually detecting, okay, what are the data rates that the clients are all using that are out there? But rather, it does a very nice job of just detecting, well, what kind of interference is in the air? But based on our experience, interference is really just a small piece of the pie in terms of the problems that people have with their Wi-Fi networks. That most of the problems have to do with just high airtime utilization. They have to do with clients. They have to do with low data rates. They have to do with, what are the, they have to do with the software that those clients are using. So while Clean Air can do some things very well, it has difficulty in actually measuring the client experience, what the quality of the network is from the client's point of view.
Great, thanks for that. Appreciate it. Another one was, does 7Signal support other wireless LAN vendors besides Cisco?
Yes, absolutely. So our system, and we're building up to the different products that we have, but our system actually is a high-performance Wi-Fi client that authenticates to any Wi-Fi network. So what that means is that we program the credentials into our system, and then our system will hop onto that Wi-Fi network and authenticate. It doesn't matter if it's Aruba, it doesn't matter if it's Ruckus, Cisco, Aerohive, Zebra, Motorola, it doesn't matter. We'll authenticate to any network and then act like a client on that network, and in doing so, measure the experience from the end user's point of view.
Right, perfect. Thanks for that. There's a few more questions. I will hold these next questions. There are a few slides down in the slide deck that we'll actually get to answer the questions. But look, certainly, please feel free for those attendees. Feel free to add any questions that you may have. Very important that you're getting the most knowledge out of this webinar as we possibly can. So, as I said, we'll keep going, but I will certainly answer the questions as they continue to come in.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. So I wanted to drill in and give a little bit of detail, technical detail, for those who are looking at making an access point a sensor. Okay, so the problem, once again, is a matter of using the right tool for the job. So when we look at the antenna pattern of one of these access points, you can see that it's angled in a way so that its reach goes in that 60-degree angle towards clients who are at the network level, which is great. By focusing the energy downwards, it does a really nice job of reaching as far as it can in order to service clients. But what that means is that it does a very bad job of measuring the performance of access points. And what we want to do with our sensor network is we want to actually see, well, how are these access points performing? How well are they able to service our clients? What kind of throughputs can they offer? What kind of what kind of load are they under? So, and another way of looking at this is, for instance, in the Cisco 3800, there's a second radio that's inside the AP. But again, when we use a second radio inside of a sensor, or a second radio inside of an access point as a sensor, we still have our coverage issues, and we still have a performance degradation issue because of interference that's created between the two antennas, or between the two radios. So when you have those two radios that are side by side, they're going to interfere with one another, making it very difficult to do the proper job of managing your Wi-Fi network. And here's an illustration of what I'm talking about here. These are the two radios that are right next to each other inside the access point. And what happens is that when you have one that is serving clients, like in radio 1 here, there's this attenuation, or there is this there's this problem where it actually blasts the radio next to it, and in doing so, it actually raises the noise floor, and this causes problems with automatic gain control. It reduces the receiver sensitivity of that radio because we've raised the noise floor artificially. And so in doing so, we're not able to, we're not really optimally using, or we're not actually creating the best experience for our clients because we don't have the right signal strength. So here's another example of what I'm talking about here. Same thing, where the radio one, the noise from that first radio is actually going to reduce the signal to noise ratio for any clients that are on that second radio by as much as 10 dBm. And again, in the process, you're actually not making that second radio really useful or efficient at all. So that's the problem. Now, with this being said, Cisco and others said to themselves, okay, well, we recognize that this, in fact, is a problem, that we've got these two radios next to each other, and this is a real issue. We get it. However, what they decided to do in order to eliminate this issue with the attenuation is they actually use the second radio as a microcell. As you can see, they changed the antenna pattern of the second radio inside that access point, so that instead of going very far out, it's actually more of a pointing down type of a pattern, as you can see here. And in doing so, and by creating that microcell, now those two APs will interfere less with one another. But once again, because of this antenna pattern, this second radio now doesn't do an optimal job of actually connecting to other access points and then running what we call active tests, where we're actually going to do throughput, packet loss, latency, jitter testing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Eric, just another question here, just while we're on this topic. Is there any particular patterns of networks or brands that may be better or worse performers?
Brands of networks that perform well or poorly, just in general?
Yeah. Well, I think the question was, is there any patterns of networks or brands that may be better or worse performers? So I'm assuming that we're talking about, perhaps not necessarily, as far as Wi-Fi is concerned in general, but I think more so around, using the sensors as or access points as sensors.
Sure. Well, I mean, there actually are not a lot of companies that are using access points as vendors. Like I said previously, we're starting to make some noise in the marketplace, and this is actually causing some of the big vendors out there to start to make claims about how they can use access points as vendors. I think that it's quite likely that they know in their hearts that they're not going to do a great job at it, but they nonetheless are trying. We are trying to debunk the myth that it's even possible to do. But, there are some, companies out there, like, for instance, you think of Air Magnet. Air Magnet Enterprise, for a very long time, has had a sensor product that was out there in the market. What we have heard from a lot of Air Magnet customers that have come over to us is that it was hard to use, hard to install, and also Air Magnet was something that you had to, it was something that you walked around with. It really was not the system that you put in place and then have information come to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where you can look at entire buildings or entire campuses or global networks for that matter. So that's something that, and also Airtight was another one. So these companies, both Airtight and as well as Air Magnet, they've been acquired, and it's not their focus so much anymore. Their parent companies have different plans for them. So, again, I see it as a huge opportunity for 7Signal because we're actually doing something radically different in terms of measuring network from the outside in as opposed to the inside out. Right.
A question regarding Xeris. Xeris basically have a thing called timeshare sensors. Do you know much about that, and can you talk to that?
I don't know much about it. I know that, again, with the variety of radios inside of a Xeris access point, you still continue to have some of those interference issues that make it difficult for the access point to act as both an AP and a sensor, but I don't have much more detail than that, Mark, unfortunately.
No problem, thank you. Another question here is how much load, and I guess this is probably getting a little bit too far into it, but we'll ask the question now. How much load or network load does a 7Signal have on a typical wireless LAN compared to just using an existing access point as a sensor?
Sure. Well, the 7Signal system and its network of sensors, they're high-performance clients on your network. And so it's really just like the same as adding one more client to your network. So if an access point is currently sharing the load with 10 clients, make it 11. You can actually control, like I said,
Sorry, just a clarification. So clients you mean as in laptop, phone, printer, whatever it may be. Yep. Okay, cool.
That's exactly correct. And so, and with regards to our payload, because remember what we're doing is we're continually simulating, uploading, and downloading files. You can actually control the size of the payload. We have some customers who like to increase that to 10, 15, 20 megabytes because they actually want to exercise their network in a way, in preparation for something that's coming down the road. But usually what our customers will do is they'll have that set for 4 megabytes. Although it is configurable, you can set it to whatever you want. And again, that's kind of an average for what our customers will do in terms of payload for their simulation of uploading and downloading files.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, let's move on. Now we're at the point where we're going to talk about the right tool for the job. So let's do that. So this is what happens when we insert a 7Signal sensor into the situation, a high-performance Wi-Fi sensor, a high-performance client, like I was said just a moment ago. Now, what makes 7Signal different is that we have not an omnidirectional antenna array, but a directional antenna array. These directional antennas allow us to amplify or shoot a beam of energy in one direction. It allows us to then connect to more access points, and when we connect to those access points, what happens is we run through our test plan. So we'll shoot a beam of energy in an area, we'll connect to an access point, we'll run our test plan. Again, we'll do the throughput, packet loss, latency, jitter testing, we'll do the spectrum analysis, we'll do a variety of other things where we measure airtime utilization. We will then disconnect from that access point and move to the next one. And we do this in a round-robin fashion. And because of the directional or beam steering that we have inside, what it allows us to do is have incredible coverage. It also attenuates or suppresses the noise that's coming from the other areas, and it allows us to have great benchmark tests. Very accurate performance testing when we do that. So that's our unit in the middle there. We call it the Sapphire Eye, and this is in fact what it does and how it works. Let's move to this right here. So the sensor, the Sapphire Eye, again, it's a high performance client. So not only do we have the high performance client, which is the Sapphire Eye, and it connects to an access point like a client, but we actually also have another product called the Mobile Eye. The Mobile Eye is an app that runs on your smartphone, and it does a great job of complementing the information, where it also does its own tests, and it can report on those as well. But in doing so, we're actually now able to get this perspective, which is from the user, not from the access point or from the controller standpoint. And there's one little line that I want to draw your attention to, and that's at the top of the page right here, this little line. Now, because the sensor is PoE, Power over Ethernet, we actually have the ability to run the exact same tests over the wire. Now, this is particularly important when we're trying to determine, well, is it a Wi-Fi issue or is it a wired issue? Well, because we run the test in both directions, we know. Now, this is just half the story, the active tests, where we simulate client traffic, uploading and downloading files, simulating voice over IP calls. But we also do what we call passive tests, where we watch all of the headers, all of the packets that are going on in the air. And in doing so, we're able to measure the airtime utilization. We're able to see the retry rate. We're able to see the spectrum and do other RF analysis. So when you take both sides of the equation, so kind of the clean air side plus you add the active tests to it, now you have end-to-end visibility of the Wi-Fi experience. So again, in doing so, this allows us to have the complete picture. And because we have the complete picture, we can now alarm and alert and warn IT administrators about problems before the phone rings. Obviously, this saves a ton of time and money.
So Eric, just a few more questions. I might jump in here as we're going. What about using 7Signals as a study? In other words, so over a predetermined period, ideally over a commissioning period. Is that what you're seeing organisations doing, or are you finding that that they're using it more from a commissioning but also an ongoing perspective?
Yeah, they're doing it. Actually, we see both. We see both. But usually, in most cases, I would say 80 to 90% of the cases, we're seeing it where they want to put the system in place, and because Wi-Fi has reached a point where it's become mission critical to their business, they need to manage it in a way where they're monitoring it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the issues are brought to them just, to benchmark a situation. Usually, our customers want to put the system in place and then manage their. Yes.
Sorry, can I just jump in there? You actually just dropped off there for a minute. Can I get you just to start that reply again?
Not a problem at all. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yep, all fine now.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. What I was saying was. What most of our customers do is because Wi-Fi is so critical, they want to put a system in place and they want to leave it there so that they are continually monitoring the quality of the network. Because as devices change, as the environment changes, they need to have problems brought to them. Rather than, we don't, again, if we were to just take a spot check and then pull the system out, now we're in reactive mode again. But we can be proactive when we put the system in place and then have it measured continually and then have it benchmark against key performance indicators and then alert on those key performance indicators so that we can hop into action and remediate before productivity is hampered or before customers or our associates get angry.
Right, perfect. So a couple of other questions there. That's great. What's the maximum range for the directional antennas? And the first question, and then the follow-up with that was, how do we then work out how many sensors that we need for our network?
Sure. So one of our sensors with the directional antenna, generally, and it depends upon the topology of your office or whatever, or building, but generally can connect to 6 to 8 access points. So when we throw an RF beam in a direction, we're generally talking about 80 to 100 feet. And then once again, it depends upon the topology, what kind of walls are in place, but what we're typically seeing is one sensor connecting to 6 to 8 access points. And what we do is we'll look at a floor plan with you, and we'll determine the optimal locations for our Sapphire eyes. And not only that, but we will also, when we actually do a scan, we set up the sensor and we do a scan, and we'll connect to as many access points as we can at neg 65 dBm. So in some cases, depending upon if it's a real open environment, that could be more than 8 access points. It could be 9, 10, 11.
Right. I think the other thing also, just to note, when you are looking at deploying the sensors, if you're using Ekahau's site survey product and you're pre-planning your network with ESS, the 7Signal product, I believe in the next release of ESS, will actually be included, so the antenna pattern, so you'll actually be able to use ESS to position where your sensors will go within the ESS program. So just for those that are on the webinar today that are using ESS, you can certainly get that information directly out of the product itself. A couple of other questions that we might just keep going if you're okay with that. Due to the AP antenna patterns, would the best location for one of your sensors be at desk level, in contrast to being ceiling mounted?
Well, actually, we have ceiling mounted and we also have desk level sensors. So we have something called the Sapphire Eye 2100, which goes into the ceiling. And then we have something which is a little smaller that you might put on the wall or you might put on the desk, and that's called the Sapphire Eye 500. And it's the only difference. It has the same exact motherboard inside of it and can do all of the same. So it can do all of the active testing and passive testing. Not only that, but also the unit has both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz spectrum analysis built right into it. The only difference is, as a smaller unit, it does have an omnidirectional antenna, and it can generally connect to maybe 2 access points. But it's perfect for a conference room, or maybe it's just perfect in certain situations where you just need a unit to cover an area. And again, it can either be on a table or it can be wall mounted. And then we have the mobile agents as well, the mobile eye, which is which you would put on an iPhone or an Android phone or tablet.
Perfect. So we've got a bunch more questions, but I think we'll just keep going through the presentation,
Okay.
And then we'll jump back into other questions as we sort of progress further.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of how the solution works here. So the Sapphire Eyes, whether we have the sensors, the 2100 large sensor, the smaller 500, or the mobile eye on the app, what we're doing is we're passing all of that performance data to our cloud. And then once it's in the cloud, all you need to do, and it's actually stored in your private profile. So it's like a multi-tenanted application, if you will. You then simply log in over the web to your IQ dashboard, and now you can actually see all of your Wi-Fi performance data across your entire enterprise. And what's so neat about this is you can have Sapphire Eyes in various buildings all across the country, all across the city, all across the world. It doesn't matter. You'll be able to see what the performance of the Wi-Fi is in all of those areas. All of that information is brought to you, and that's very exciting. So this is a little bit of a closer look at what that Sapphire IQ dashboard looks like. And what we're really trying to do is we've got these 4 macro KPIs trying to answer these 4 very critical questions. As you can see, connectivity, IP services, authentication, and quality. Those are the big 4. Can clients actually connect to the Wi-Fi network? So remember, our clients, our Sapphire Eyes, are clients that are constantly connecting and disconnecting from the network, and we measure that continually. Can they get an IP address? So we've got DNS services, IP services. We've got all of the different stages of DHCP that we're measuring as well, so we can see if there's a problem with DHCP servers. Can they authenticate? So remember, because we're a client, we're continually trying to authenticate. So we've got all of the phases and stages of radius that are built in, and we capture that as well. And then finally, what's the quality of their experience? And this is where we're, again, measuring throughput, packet loss, latency, jitter. We're actually calculating a MOS score, a mean opinion score for voice over IP traffic. And we historically track all of this over time so that you can easily see, is there some kind of trend that's taking place? Is there some kind of performance degradation that's taking place? And if so, let's investigate it, so that let's dig into the application a little bit more and see what's going on so that we can identify it quickly and remediate. This is a snapshot of some of the KPIs that are built into 7Signal's IQ. You can see those 4 macro KPIs are right here. And then underneath each one of those macro KPIs, you see the detail. So for connectivity, we're measuring, are we getting beacons? Are we attaching? Are we associating? You can see all of the things right here. Like I said, in IP services, the DHCP process, stage by stage. And under quality, all of those things that you see there, including air utilization and also capturing the number of clients per AP. And in doing so, we can actually tell you right out of the gate, are we having coverage problems? Are we having capacity issues? And it's all brought right to you. It starts, this idea of being proactive that I've been harping on for so long here, starts with email notification. So this is an example of an email that you would receive. When you get one of these, you can see immediately, this is a beacon availability problem. We can see that we're not receiving beacons. It's a stuck AP, if you will. We see what the AP name is. We see the offending AP. We know where it is. It's in the on the 4th floor, and we know when. We have the time. And in doing so, we can just go right into Cisco Prime and we can see, wow, it looks like it's working, but maybe I need to reboot it. And then you reboot it, and then immediately 7Signal can connect to it, and the problem is solved. I don't know how many times we were able to detect for our customers situations where it looked like the AP had the light on and everything was working fine, but it just wasn't. It needed to be restarted. And they were able to see this quickly and easily by getting one of these notifications. Here's another one of those notifications. This is the DHCP server unreachable notification. Again, I've got the offending AP. I know exactly which access point is having the problem. I know where it is. This is at a college campus, by the way, building 166, room 152, and I know when it happened. And so by getting these delivered right to my inbox, I can take action. I don't have to wait for the phone to ring, and I don't have to get yelled at for not detecting this problem that's been perhaps going on for days or weeks. So now let's go over a very quick common use case, this idea of, is it the LAN or is it the wireless LAN? And here's an example of a customer who actually used our system and their own test endpoints in order to isolate issues. So one thing that's important to note is that 7Signal has a test endpoint. It's a VM, it's a virtual, we call it the sonar, and it can be an appliance or a virtual machine. And you can put this anywhere in your network, and you can move it around if you want to as well. And in doing so, we're actually now testing what the performance is between endpoints that are important to my business. With a lot of apps that you might be using on a phone, like a speed test, those are test endpoints that are out on the internet somewhere, and that might be fine, but that doesn't help you in trying to isolate or troubleshoot issues on your network. Let me show you what I mean. So this is a situation where the customer actually, they took our 7Signal sonar appliance and they actually moved it around. They didn't install 4 here, but they actually did this one at a time because they were really stumped. And they strategically placed them in these different locations to see, okay, now let's see what our 7Signal Sapphire eyes are getting in terms of performance. And this is what they saw. It was horrible. But what they saw also was that on the LAN side, I mean, they were getting tremendous throughput. Because of our system, they were able to trace this back to some firewall issues. They actually then remediated the situation. They went in and they reconfigured the firewalls appropriately. And in doing so, they were able to achieve much better throughputs through all of the different areas of their wide area network. So this was a real success story for one of our customers. They were just chasing their tails for many weeks, and then when we came along and said, hey, look, why don't we try to isolate this? Let's put the sonars and the 7Signal system in place. It'll make it a lot easier for you, and it did. It was great. Okay, so Mark, I wanted to just show just a couple screens of IQ if we still had time, or would you like to ask a few more questions?
Yeah, I think we've got a bunch more questions that we want to make sure that we get through, so we might actually just go through these now, and in that way, if anybody else does need to drop off at the 11 o'clock mark, they can do so. So questions regarding the data roaming, or can the sensors detect data roaming issues, or detect roaming issues, I should say?
Yeah, it's actually a test that we're working on right now. So it's a little tricky because our sensor is in a fixed location. So what we're actually trying to do is we're trying to simulate, see how we can simulate a roaming situation using our Sapphire Eye sensor. And we're also looking at how we can simulate or capture roaming information using our mobile eye sensor on the smartphone. Because from it, we're able to actually get the multiple BSSIDs. We're actually able to see that it went from one radio to the next. That goes in, we capture that. It goes into our database. So that's something that's coming down the road, and we are very aware of how valuable that will be.
Great. Is the 7Signal solution, is it unique in the marketplace? And I guess what would be the differentiations, the differentiators between 7Signal and any competitor?
Sure. Yeah. Well, and hopefully we've kind of made that clear throughout the course of our presentation. But what's really unique is this idea of measuring from the client's point of view, the client's experience. We're actually connecting as a client. We're running through the connectivity, the ability to get an IP address, the ability to authenticate, and then all of the quality metrics I mentioned, throughput, packet loss, latency, jitter, voice over IP testing, the talking versus listening, what the quality is. So there's no other solution on the market today that actually can capture or actually exercise your network continually 24 hours a day, 7 days a week like that. And then also at the same time have spectrum analysis built in for both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, and also capture all of the passive metrics from the headers in the air in order to calculate airtime utilization, in order to see what the retry rates are, the data rates, to see if there are particular devices that actually have trouble on your network versus other devices. So it's the completeness of the system. Anybody can walk around with a tool and they can take a few readings, but then again, that's just a passive, or I'm sorry, that's just a reactive system. But instead, being able to measure from end to end and then run all of these tests over the wire as well is truly unique in the marketplace. And actually, we have a number of patents around this that are in the United States and in the EU around this technology. So we feel really confident about that.
And I guess that's, from an in-technology perspective, we've obviously been working in the Wi-Fi space since the days that Colubris were bought by HP about 8 or 10 years ago. And obviously we're working with Ekahau Site Survey product that does, predictive and post-site survey work as well. For us, being able to provide our channel and end customers with this constant monitoring of that experience from the end user's perspective is something that we saw as being very unique. The relationship between 7Signal and in-technology, this isn't something that's just happened over the last 2 months, although it has just happened over the last 2 months. We've been looking at 7Signal for about the last 18 months and looking at where they're going within the market and what they've come out with and what their development process is. And for us as a distributor of technology, it's very important for us to ensure that we vet the vendors that we actually take to market. And so, when you are looking at either, there's a number of resellers and there's a number of end customers on the call. Our business or go-to-market strategy is always going to be through our channel partners. And we've had a lot of requests and a lot of requirements and questions from partners around, hey, you've got Ekahau Site Survey, but what else do you have in and around the ability for us to be able to actually track and monitor what's actually going on from the end user's perspective, from the customer's perspective? So, that's the reason, I guess, to answer that a little bit longer answer, that's the reason that we sort of looked at 7Signal is that solution. And to be frank, we haven't or weren't able to find anybody else on the planet that did anything similar, to what 7Signal can do. So, that's a little bit of an add-on from our side. Another couple of questions. Contact for pricing. We'll send you some details in relation to the right contact place or people to talk to around pricing. Any non-cloud or on-premise options?
There is an option for on-premise. I think it's something that we would talk about. It's something that we would make sure was right for your situation. But there is a scenario where there are certain financial institutions that we do business with in the States where they want to be able to take the server that we have in the cloud and they want to be able to install that and manage it in their own data center. And we've worked with them in order to accomplish that in certain situations. So.
Just unmute. Keeping on that cloud theme, what's stored in the cloud?
Hello.
Assuming that no authentication details would actually be stored anywhere other than on the network.
Mark, you cut out there, and I just missed the last 10 seconds. Yeah.
Okay, so just keeping on the theme of the cloud, what is stored in the cloud? Assuming that to authenticate credentials, that information would need to be stored somewhere. So where is that stored?
What happens is that you configure the system through a web interface, and that is in the cloud. And then what happens is that it's all packaged up in a profile, and then it is secure between the server and the sensor on site. We're using TLS in terms of security. It's all encrypted. and that actually then the sensor on site receives its profile, and the profile is basically everything that it needs in order to run its tests. So that includes the credentials that it needs. It also is the test profile. You can customize the test profile so that it's running against your own test endpoints on the internet or on your WAN. It's going to run whatever type of duty cycle you want it to run. But important to know, it is encrypted. That is an encrypted connection. We're using TLS security. We have a lot of customers who are using it and comfortable with using it.
Great, thanks. So 2 questions I'm going to sort of tie into one. Once an error has been detected and the access point, as an example, has been rebooted, is there a follow-up email to advise that the error has been cleared? And I guess the other thing that I'll add into that, prior to that, I should have really asked this: does 7Signal give you a remediation fix? In other words, if it sees an error, will it give you, a potential resolution to what that solution might be to resolve that issue?
Yeah, so for the first part of your question, it will not send out another email. However, you will see in the user interface that the problem has been fixed immediately. Because remember, we're historically tracking all of this. We're actually measuring it in real time. So you do, and that's one of the powerful things of the solution, is that people will make a change, and then they will go to the system, and they will immediately see, I'm getting beacons again. Immediately. I mean, within a minute. So there's no additional email necessary, which some people quite appreciate because they don't get so many emails. And then the second part of your question, we have actually built into our system, it's called Auto Optimizer. What it does is it actually analyzes all of the data for a certain period of time, last week, last month. It analyzes all of the data, and it actually gives you a set of recommendations for remediation. It gives you a list of things that you should do. For instance, turn off B radios to eliminate the low data rates, or turn off the highest data rates so that people are not having to downshift all the time. It will give you recommendations like with regards to coverage, with regards to capacity. So the answer is yes, Mark. We have that built into the solution. We've taken over 100 years of engineering experience in Wi-Fi, and we've tried to build it into our solution.
Right, thanks. Question from Joe: can we supply some example profiles of customers or use cases? Joe, I'll answer that one for you. Directly after the webinar, you'll actually get an email that will have a copy of the recording, plus also a copy of locations where you can get white papers, use cases, case studies, a whole lot. So there'll be a whole bunch of information that will come out within the next couple of hours once the webinar is actually completed. Okay. Does the 7Signal sensor work with or any compatible Wi-Fi product?
Yeah, pretty much. So it'll attach to any Wi-Fi network that you've got. So again, we program the Sapphire Eye to get onto your network just like a client, and then it starts working just like a client. So it's really compatible with any network.
Great, thanks. Demo units, I'll answer that one for you, Scott. Absolutely. Also on the email that will come out will actually be a request for a wireless LAN assessment. There is a POC form that you can complete, and we will work with you to get a POC running for your customers. 2 other questions here before we continue. Is the data encrypted in the cloud?
Yes, absolutely.
Great, excellent. And can we see a baseline of the performance of the wireless network?
A baseline, yes, absolutely. So again, because we're monitoring and measuring 24 hours a day, you're able to see what your network is truly capable of when there's traffic and when there isn't traffic. And if you put in if you use like ESS and you put in a new network, and then you put in our system at around the same time, you're able to benchmark it at that moment. And then as clients move in and out of your network, you've got 7Signal there to monitor and manage the performance all the way through.
Perfect. Thanks for that. We might just jump on to, I don't know whether we're going to have time to run through the demo, but I wouldn't mind just going through the introduction of the Mobile Eye for smartphones just sure. Before we wrap up. We're about time now. We've got probably 2 or 3 minutes left. and we've got a whole bunch more questions, but if we can get through this last sort of 2 or 3 slides, that'd be great. And then any additional questions, certainly feel free to continue to ask questions. We will continue the Q&A after the time for those that want to hang on. So.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. And I would say that if people want to see a live demo of the system, that they should follow up with you and schedule some time where we can walk them through the paces of the system. I think that would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
So this is a Mobileye, which is brand new, that we just came out with. And what you do is we assign you and your organization a profile ID. You enter it in, and when you do that, it means that all of the test taking that happens on your smartphone will go into your database in the cloud. So it is, again, it's a multi-tenant application. So then you could log into IQ, and you can actually see data taken from your devices. So this is the testing screen. As you can see, there's only a few things that we can test using the smartphone: ping, throughput, web page download, and voice quality. But what makes this application unique is the fact that it actually can ping your servers. It can actually do throughput against your sonars that are on your network, as opposed to some that are in the cloud that are offered through the App Store. So it can download the web pages that are important to you. And in the middle, we see we get all of the information. We can see the access point vendor. We can see the BSSID, the radio you're on. We can see the test target. We can see your metrics. We know what kind of device you have, that it's an iPhone 6. We know what version of software it has, that it's 934 or 935. And so there's just a variety of things that the app can do, but I think what's most important is the fact that it does store the test results in the cloud. And in doing so, you're able to keep a running tab and a history of how different devices are experiencing the Wi-Fi network in your environment. So here's the question, Mark, what do you think? What can Wi-Fi performance management do for you? I hope that today everybody was able to see that it can be very powerful, that we've reached that tipping point where Wi-Fi is mission critical and we need a system of performance management so that we can stop being reactive and start being proactive in managing Wi-Fi, so that we're not chasing after problems, but we have problems brought to us. Mark, what do you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. And listen, thank you so much. Look, we do have some more questions, but I think we may answer those offline only because of the very conscious of time. If you could just click one more time, one of the things was asked previously, how do you get a hold of some demo kit? There is a wireless LAN assessment request form. You can follow this link. We will send it out to you, but if you're really keen to go ahead, you can quickly type this into your browser now and fill that out. One of our guys will get in contact with you to walk you through that process. I'll just get you to jump onto the next slide if I can. One of the things that we've, in actual fact, it's ironic that we're talking about Wi-Fi networks and we're talking about connectivity and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, we were advised at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon that our provider of our SIP lines have actually gone under. So we are in the transition process today, of all bloody days, in getting a new SIP provider. So our phones are down. Don't stress. Next slide if you can. We actually have the details of Paul, who's our business manager, our RTLS and Wi-Fi business manager, or for any of those channel partners that are on the call, there's Charlie's details. Again, we'll send the details out to you directly after the session has finished. But again, I'd like to, in actual fact, we have one more question that we will actually ask, the offline question. That's fine. Look, thank you very much, everybody, for your time, and thank you, Eric, for your time. Obviously, it's getting late over there. You're probably gone to your 3rd or 4th beer by now. So, mate, thank you very much for your time. Thank you to everybody who attended. It's been a great session. Lots and lots of questions. We really appreciate it, and expect to hear back from one of our team as a follow-up over the next day or so. I do expect the email to come out in the next hour or two in relation to the information that we have discussed. We will also document the questions that were answered, the questions that were asked, and answer them in a separate follow-up email that will come out over the next couple of days. So anybody that, if you do have any additional questions, please feel free to send them through to Charlie or to Paul. And again, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to working together with you in the future around 7Signal.
Thanks for joining us. You will be receiving an email that will alert you to the on-demand status of today's event so that you can review any material you missed or simply may want to go over again. On behalf of our presenters, thank you for joining us and taking time to view the presentation. My name is Gemma, and we wish a good day.